Hello students, welcome to readmedprep Academy channel. Today in Organisms and Populations part 5, we are going to talk about populations and population attributes, population age distribution, growth models and curves, population regulation and population interaction. First, let us move on to the populations and population attributes. What is meant by population? Population is defined as any group of organisms of the same species which can interbreed among themselves and occupy a particular space and function as part of a biotic community. Here you can see the population of the zebra. Properties of population. A population has various properties like population density, natality, otherwise called the birth rate, mortality, otherwise called the death rate, age distribution, biotic potential, dispersion, and R or K selected growth forms. A population possesses genetic characteristics that are directly related to their adaptiveness, reproductive success, and persistence in their habitats over time. Life history of an organism is an important part of this attribute. The population has a definite structure and function that can be described with reference to time. Population attributes include the population density, natality or birth rate, mortality or death rate, population dispersion, migration, emigration, and immigration. Population density. The density of a population refers to its size in relation to the unit of space and time. Population density is the total number of that species within a natural habitat. Here in this image of the world, you can see the population density per square kilometer is marked with different colors. The lightest pink color is the 0 to 25, whereas the darkest you can see is around 1500 to 9000 per square kilometer is the population density. The size of the population. The size of the population can be measured in several ways, including abundance, that is the absolute number in population, numerical density, number of individuals per unit area or volume, biomass density, biomass per unit area or volume. The population density of a species can be expressed with reference to the actual area of the habitat available to the species. When the size of the individuals in the population is relatively uniform, then density is expressed in terms of the number of individuals. It is called the numerical density. Natality, or otherwise called the birth rate. Populations increase because of natality or birth rate. Natality is equivalent to birth rate and is an expression of the production of new individuals in the population by birth, hatching, germination, or fission. The two main aspects of reproduction, namely fertility and fecundity, play a significant role in the population. Natality rate may be expressed in crude birth rate, the number of organisms born per female per unit time. Birth rate B is equal to number of birth per unit time by the average population. Mortality. Mortality is the population decline factor and is opposite of natality. Mortality can be expressed as a loss of individuals in unit time or death rate. Generally, mortality is expressed as specific mortality, that is, the number of members of an original population dying after the lapse of a given time. The crude death rate of a population can be calculated by the equation death rate D is equal to number of deaths per unit time by the average population. The rate of mortality, death, is determined by density. Mortality is high at high density because of the hazards of overcrowding, increased predation, and spread of disease. Mortality rates vary among species and are correlated and influenced by a number of factors such as destruction of nests, eggs or young by storms, winds, floods, predators, accidents, and desertion by parents. Population dispersion. Populations have a tendency to disperse or spread out in all directions until some barriers are reached. This is observed by the migration of the individuals into, that is called immigration, or migration of individuals out, that is called emigration of the population area. Migration is a peculiar and unique kind of mass population movement from one place to another and back. To avoid the severe winter cold, Siberian cranes migrate from Siberia to Vedantangal in Tamil Nadu and return back in spring. In the image on the right side, you can see the birds flying and migrating towards the south. Some fishes are known to migrate from the sea to freshwater. This is called anadromous migration. Example, salmon. You can see the salmon migrates from the sea towards the freshwater through the estuary and lays the eggs. Some fishes migrate from freshwater to the sea. This is called catadromous migration. Example, eel. Catadromous migration, you can see where the eel migrates from the fresh water towards the sea water for laying eggs. What are the differences between anadromous and catadromous fish? Anadromous fish, the migrating fish from salt water to spawn in fresh water, whereas catadromous fish migrating from the fresh water to spawn in the sea. Anadromous fish, the adults live in seawater, whereas catadromous fish adults live in fresh water. Examples of anadromous fish: salmon, smelt, striped bass, shad and sturgeon. Whereas catadromous fish examples: true eels. Emigration. Under natural conditions, emigration usually occurs when there is overcrowding. This is regarded as an adaptive behavior that regulates the population in a particular site and prevents overexploitation of the habitat. Further, it leads to occupation of new areas elsewhere. Immigration, it leads to rise in the population levels. If the population increases beyond the carrying capacity, it can result in increased mortality among the immigrants or decreased reproductive capacity of the individuals. Both emigration and immigration are initiated or triggered by weather and other abiotic and biotic factors. Here you can see when a flock of birds migrate from a place and leave the place, it is called emigration. If the flock of birds enters a new place and mixes with the population there, it is called immigration. Here you can see the flock of sheep. Few sheep can enter into the flock. This is called immigration. Or few sheep may leave the flock and enter the new flock. This is called emigration. Here you can see the movement of sheep, which shows no geometrical sense. Now let us move on to the population age distribution. The proportion of the age groups like the pre-reproductive, reproductive and post-reproductive in a population its age distribution attribute. This means the reproductive status of the population at a given time and is an indicator of the future population size. Usually, a rapidly growing population will have large proportion of younger individuals, whereas a stable population will have even distribution of all ages or classes. A declining population will have larger proportion of older individuals. Here you can see the age distribution pyramids, where age structure is given on the left side and the age distribution. The male on the left side and the females on the right side. Here you can see that in an increasing population, the reproductive age group of the younger population is more in number. In a stable population, the pre-reproductive, reproductive and the post-reproductive age groups are of equal in distribution and number. Whereas in decreasing population, the post-reproductive age or older individuals are more in number. Growth models and curves. Growth patterns. Populations show characteristic growth patterns or forms. These patterns can be plotted and termed as J-shaped growth form and S-shaped growth form or sigmoid form. J-shaped growth form, when a population increases rapidly in an exponential fashion and then stops abruptly due to the environmental resistance or due to sudden appearance of a limiting factor, they are said to be exhibiting J-shaped growth form. Many insects show explosive increase in number during the rainy season, followed by their sudden disappearance at the end of the season. On the right side, you can see the J-shaped curve, time on the x-axis and number of individuals on the y-axis. The sudden rise of the population and there is sudden decline of the population. S-shaped growth form, otherwise called sigmoid growth. Some populations, as in a population of small mammals, increase slowly at first, then more rapidly and gradually slow down as environmental resistance increases, whereby equilibrium is reached and maintained. Their growth is represented by a S-shaped growth curve. On the right side below you can see the sigmoid growth curve where the number of individuals in the y-axis and time in the x-axis. When it has reached a capacity, the S-shaped curve becomes stationary. To sum up the J-shaped and the S-shaped growth curves, you can see the population on the y-axis and the time on the x-axis. The J-shaped curve where there is rapid growth of the organisms that is beyond the biotic potential, and a S-shaped curve occurs till the level of the carrying capacity, and the growth is mainly based on the environmental resistance between the two curves. Or K selected growth forms. Biotic potential or reproductive capacity, or it is the maximum reproductive capacity of an organism under optimum environmental conditions. You can see the curve on the right side below where the y-axis is the population growth, the x-axis is the time. The growth occurs till a level of the environmental carrying capacity. If it goes beyond the environmental carrying capacity, it is called the exponential growth or the biotic potential. R. Carrying capacity, K. The maximum number of organisms that a region can support without environmental degradation is called carrying capacity. Here you can see in the graph where the number of individuals in the y-axis and the time in the x-axis, and a S-shaped curve is formed till the level of the carrying capacity where the growth occurs continuously, and at a level till the carrying capacity the growth becomes decreasing. Environmental resistance is the sum total of the environmental limiting factors, both biotic and abiotic, which together act to prevent the biotic potential of an organism from being realized. The differences between R selected and K selected species you can see here. The R selected species, otherwise called the reproductive capacity, smaller sized individuals are seen, whereas K selected species or carrying capacity, the larger sized organisms are seen. In R selected species, they produce many offspring, whereas K selected species produce few offspring. R selected species mature early, K selected species late maturity with extended parental care. R selected species short life expectancy, whereas K selected species long life expectancy. R selected species, each individual reproduces only once or few times in the lifetime, whereas K selected species can reproduce more than once in lifetime. R selected species only few reach adulthood, whereas K selected species most of the individuals reach maximum lifespan. R selected species unstable environment and density independent, whereas K selected species are present in the stable environment and density dependent. Now let us move on to the population regulation. The inherent tendency of all animal populations is to increase in number, but it does not increase indefinitely. Once the carrying capacity of the environment is reached, population numbers remain static or fluctuate depending on the environmental conditions. This is regulated by many factors which are density independent, called the extrinsic factors, or density dependent, called the intrinsic factors. Extrinsic factors include availability of space, shelter, weather, food, etc. Intrinsic factors include competition, predation, immigration, and diseases. Here in this depiction you can see the population regulation process. The extrinsic factors like predators, food supply, diseases, parasites, weather, shelter all have an effect on the population regulation, whereas the intrinsic factors are that affect the population regulation like sex, age, physiology, behavior and genetics. Now let us move on to the population interaction. Populations interact for food, shelter, mating or for other necessities. Interaction may be intraspecific or interspecific. Intraspecific means interaction within the members of the same species. Interspecific means interaction among the organisms of different species. Intraspecific association is observed for all livelihood processes like feeding, territoriality, breeding and protection. Interspecific associations or interactions can be neutral, positive, negative. Neutral, where different species live together but do not affect each other. Positive, it is a symbiotic relationship in which no organism in association is harmed and either one or both may be benefited. It is of two types, mutualism, commensalism. Negative, one or both of the interacting organisms will be affected, as in the case of competition, predation and parasitism. Here, let us see in this table the common types of interspecific interactions. Number 1, amensalism, where one species is affected, species 2 is not affected. General nature of the interaction: the most powerful animal or large organisms inhibits the growth of other lower organisms. Examples: cat and rat. Mutualism, where both the species are benefited, species 1 and species 2. The interaction favorable to both and obligatory. Example: between crocodile and bird. Commensalism, where one species is benefited, species 1, whereas species 2 is neither benefited nor harmed. Population 1, the commensal benefits, while population 2, the host is not affected. Example: suckerfish on shark. Competition, where both the species 1 and 2 are affected. The general nature of interaction: direct inhibition of a species by the other. Example: birds compete with squirrels for nuts and seeds. Parasitism, where one species is benefited and species 2 is affected. Population 1, the parasite, generally smaller than the 2, the host. Example: ascaris and tapeworm in human digestive tract. Predation, where species 1 is benefited, species 2 is harmed. Population 1, the predator, generally larger than population 2, the prey. Example: lion predatory on deer. So thank you. Kindly subscribe, like, share and comment to channel Read MedPrep Academy. Kindly register for UG and PG NEET type MCQs in our website www.readmedprepacademy.com. Our Facebook ID is Read MedPrep Academy. Our email is readmedprepacademy@gmail.com. Our Instagram is Read MedPrep Academy. Kindly post your questions in the comment box. We will reply with appropriate answers regarding the lecture. To join Read MedPrep Academy, kindly WhatsApp the number given below. Thank you very much.